Good afternoon. I am welcoming you all to our weekly Lunch and Learn. My name is Holly Dinnany. I am with Family Partners of Morrison, Sussex County, and I am pleased to have you at our virtual lunch table today. I am going to remind everyone that we understand that you're all busy and working under still amazing conditions. So if you would like to keep your camera off and nibble on your lunch, that's a-okay with us. If you'd like to turn it on and let us see your smile, we're happy with that too, but we are just happy that you're here. And today, we are a couple of housekeeping items. If you have a question, if you have a comment that you'd like to make, we invite you to utilize the chat function. Our speaker, Danny Papa, today has said that it is a-okay for us to interrupt or to interject with his comments. So utilize the chat function if you like. And also, please keep yourself muted unless you'd like to speak. That way, it just kind of minimizes the background noise. So I am going to remind you that today's topic is a serious one. It's on human trafficking. We're going to get some updates and maybe some tips on prevention. And with us today is the president of the Board of Trustees for the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and that is Danny Papa, who also is an administrator, K-12 supervisor of curriculum and instruction for social studies at the Jefferson Township School District. So Danny, I'd like to welcome you to our program. And I would like to start off with, if I may, having you tell us about, you've got a really interesting story on how you got more involved with the New Jersey, I assume this is how you got involved with the New Jersey Alliance Against Human Trafficking, and that you had some students who kind of got a little itch to do something, and you were a good teacher and responded. So do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Sure. So thank you, Holly, for having me here today. Always honored to be able to speak, to a group of people who are passionate about making a difference in the lives of our youth, especially about an issue that is extremely important, as we're going to talk about today, regarding online grooming. But first, so I first learned about human trafficking, I would say, when I was in my mid-20s. I never knew about the issue before. I didn't know that that sexual exploitation of children existed in our world. And when I first learned about it, and my heart was so gripped, and I felt like I just felt so compelled that I had to do something, and I didn't know exactly what to do. So I ended up donating $20 a month to an organization that was making a difference in Southeast Asia. They're called Love 146. They're based out of Connecticut. And I just held that passion for a few years. And then I guess it was probably in my third or fourth year of teaching, I opened up a lesson about the introduction of slavery in Jamestown, the Jamestown colony in 1619, the introduction of slaves there. And I asked my students, does slavery still exist today? And obviously their answers were, no way, Mr. Papa, how could slavery still exist today? And I gave them about a 10-minute overview of the issue of human trafficking and modern day slavery, what human slavery looks like in different parts of the globe, and what human trafficking looks like here in the United States. And after the lesson, a student came up to me and said, Mr. Papa, I'd like to know more about this. Can you share that web address with me? So I shared it with her, and she came back after the weekend and she said, Mr. Papa, I spent the whole weekend learning about this issue of human trafficking, and we have to do something about this. And how amazing is that, right? I mean, to this day, I can't tell that story without bringing a smile to my face, that a young person was so motivated by and inspired by what she learned about a human rights violation that existed on our globe, and just felt so compelled to do something. So to make a really long story short, we put together she drafted some of her friends. We started an after-school club. And from there, we launched what is called Project Stay Gold, which is a student nonprofit organization where students are empowered, their voices are amplified, to raise awareness, to use education as a means of prevention to raise awareness about the issue of human trafficking here in New Jersey and also beyond. And the students have done so many amazing things. I can't even begin to go into all of those things today, but I will say that the work of the students was recognized on the floor of the United States Senate by interim Senator Jeff Chiesa back in 2013. And as recent as the legislation that was passed by our state legislature and signed into law last summer by Governor Murphy, which requires human trafficking education to be offered and resources made available by the Department of Education to schools in New Jersey. That was directly linked to the work of our students. I had a student testify in favor of that bill when it was entering the state assembly. And really that was a dream come true of so many of the students that the Department of Education would provide resources and materials to schools around New Jersey to bring awareness to the issue of human trafficking. And so, you know, I have to say that being that this is a Morris and Sussex organization that, you know, that I'm speaking with today, you know, these are students of Morris County that did this amazing work. You know, Jefferson Township is located in the northern part of Morris County. Oftentimes thought it's in Sussex County, but it actually is Morris County. And we've done a lot of work in Morris County with a number of different schools that have brought our students in for speaking engagements, for assemblies. And, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in these counties. And I'll share a little bit of that in the presentation as well.
And Danny, if I can say too, I mean, obviously kudos to the students, but you know, you obviously were very present and willing to go above and beyond your responsibilities too. And I salute you for that, because these kids, you know, it must always be a challenge to motivate them and reach them, but then to also support them when they rise to the occasion is an honor, but it's commendable. So thank you so much for being there for those students in such a meaningful way.
Yeah, thank you.
That's terrific. Okay, so I want to just ask you real quick. I mean, I think it's, you said you didn't know much about human trafficking before you became involved. And I think I had talked with you before our meeting started about that. I've been in meetings myself recently where I've heard law enforcement representatives say that some schools just aren't interested in hearing about it because they don't think it relates to them. So I'm eager for you to shed some light on why it does relate to us, and especially now in this time of remote study and less structure. So I am going to turn it over to you, Danny. Fill us in.
Great. All right. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me just find where I'm at.
And while Danny's looking for that, I just want to remind everybody that we are recording this presentation, and we will be sharing it with you following the presentation, as well as we'll put together some notes that might be helpful, or contact lists or resource lists. So feel free to listen and ask questions, but you don't have to kill yourself writing notes. So we'll try to help you out with that afterwards. That looks good to me, Danny.
Okay, let me just go get to the beginning here. Okay, so today I am going to share a presentation on preventing online grooming. And I'll talk very briefly and very simply about human trafficking, but really the focus today is about online grooming. And one of our and this is really, you know, I'll talk a little bit as well about the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking. We're doing so much work here in the state, but really one of our primary focuses currently is on preventing online grooming in the midst of this COVID era, and the fact that thousands and thousands of students across our state are really tethered to either their phone and or their laptop, for that's how they're receiving their education today. One of our partners is Lieutenant John Pizarro of the New Jersey State Police. He is the head of the Internet Crimes Against Children Unit. So the information I'm providing you with today, the majority of that information is provided from John and the work that he does every single day in preventing internet crimes against children. And this was a quote that he gave to us, which was just so powerful, that I just want to open up with and just say, this is his quote: "The new normal has become distance learning and other forms of virtual communication. This is the virtual playground where children reside, and it has given predators the ability to be on the same playground with those children without parents knowing." So, you know, I want to open up with today and just say that I would say for the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking and all the work we do, I would say our largest challenge, and we have many challenges that are facing our work, but probably our largest challenge is getting our society to listen and to get our society to even care about the issue of human trafficking. There are many misconceptions and many myths that are surrounding this. And I would say the largest misconception is that human trafficking doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in my town, or it can't exist in my county. You know, it's just speaking very I'm going to bring up Morris County later, but when I started to work with our students, we developed relationships with agents within Homeland Security and as well as the FBI. And I had a Homeland Security agent come speak to our students who were working with Project Stay Gold. And he told us about a raid that he was part of, where he did surveillance of the Red Roof Inn on Route 46 in Parsippany. And what he saw during his surveillance was a very young Asian woman brought into the Red Roof Inn, did not leave the Red Roof Inn for 10 days. And over the course of those 10 days, saw dozens, anywhere between a dozen and 2 dozen different men every single day going in and out of that room. And you know, that's just one of many examples of how human trafficking exists here in Morris County as well as Sussex County. I would challenge you to go to nj.com, the state newspaper, and if you just type in human trafficking Morris County, you would be shocked at the number of different cases and arrests and stories that exist. When I speak in Morris County, or usually whatever county I speak in, I usually bring headlines for you to see. I have headlines later in this presentation. I'm not sure if I can't remember if I have Morris County specific or not. However, when I speak to students, I ask them to pick out the different towns that they recognize in the articles that I give them. And in the articles I give them, you know, they will pick out towns like Rockaway and Mount Olive, and Dover and Parsippany and Morristown. So, you know, for us to think that we're immune to this issue that I'm talking about today is a major misconception. Human trafficking exists all around us. And beyond that, we have to understand that our students today, our young people, are learning online. They are on the internet 5 days a week. They're in front of their phones. I would say, you know, you can't get the phones out of their hands. And any child who is in front of a phone, glued to a phone and in front of a computer screen is at risk of what I'm talking about today, and that is online grooming. So I have a video here, which I don't think we're gonna have the time to watch, but what I'd like to do is I'll share this presentation with Holly and she could send that out and you could watch this video on your own time. Extremely powerful video. So first, what I'd like to do is just define quickly what is human trafficking, okay? So human trafficking, in order for a case, when it's reported to, or in order for someone to be found guilty of human trafficking, there needs to be an act for a means and then for the purpose. And there has to be force, fraud, or coercion, which is essentially what will be classified as human trafficking. So there's an act, right? There's the recruitment process. Today, we're going to be talking about the grooming process. There could be harboring and there could be transferring of people for what means and through what means. And the means of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power, and so on. And then for what purpose? The purpose of exploitation, right? And then you have a whole list here. And it grieves me to even say, and grieves me even to think that many of our youth face the threat of this type of exploitation because of the predators and what their objectives are for the children that they are luring and grooming through the internet. And that is for sexual exploitation, forced labor, slavery or similar practices, and so on. And really what we're going to look at more today is exploitation, and it could be forced labor at times as well as you know, child pornography, which I don't like that term. I like to refer to that term as simply child abuse. So for a case to be considered human trafficking, there needs to be an element of force, fraud, or coercion for the means of exploitation and for the purpose of exploitation. So really, really quick, and I don't want to, my intention is not to spend time on this, but I want to take a step back and just take a look at the macro view of the business of modern slavery. So and this is taken from the International Labor Organization and their statistics. We know that human trafficking estimates to bring in profits of $150 billion each year. And you could see the breakdown here that 68% is labor exploitation. And that could be anything from children in Africa being forced to harvest cocoa in the cocoa fields for billion-dollar organizations like Hershey and M&M Mars and Nestle. Their cocoa is linked to the slave fields in Africa, where the cocoa is being harvested by children who are child slaves. And then labor exploitation exists all over our globe in many different ways, and I don't have time to get into that today. 22% by this estimate is sexual exploitation, and then 10% is state imposed. So the $150 billion industry, something that you need to keep in mind. The reason human trafficking is so incredibly profitable for members of organized crime, and we can obviously fill in who organized crime is, whether they're gangs, drug cartel, or cartels, or mafia related. Or we'll use the term organized crime. And what organized crime has found is that when you take a drug and you sell that drug and that drug is gone. When you sell a weapon, you sell that weapon once and that weapon is gone. The sale of a human being is far more profitable to organized crime, because a human could be sold, 15 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. So what law enforcement has found is that organized crime is making drugs and weapons trafficking their side business, and making human trafficking their primary business, because and the other aspect of it too is human trafficking is a very complicated and difficult crime to prosecute. It's easy to say that these fingerprints were found on this weapon, or this weapon was found in the back of this van, or these drugs were found in this house. But it is very difficult to say that this young girl or boy is being sold for sex by this man over there, right? And there's a lot of reasons why, and a lot of it stems from the mental manipulation and the coercion that's used, where the young person will not turn in their pimp or the predator or the trafficker, simply because they have been brainwashed that law enforcement is the enemy, law enforcement will hurt them, and that they need their pimp or their trafficker for a multitude of reasons, right? That's where their food is given, and their all that they need for life is provided by their trafficker. So it's very rare that they'll turn on their trafficker. So let's just take a quick look at this. And I like to show this to students. Modern day slavery annually, it brings in a $150 billion year revenue. So let's look at the NFL. The NFL brought in a revenue in 2017 of $14 billion. Major League Baseball in 2018, $10.3 billion. NBA, the National Basketball Association, brought in a revenue of $7.4 billion. In 17-18, and then 17-18, the National Hockey League brought in revenue of $4.86 billion. And when you add that up, that's a total of $36.5 billion. So human trafficking, on an annual basis, the revenue that is brought in is nearly 5 times what our 4 professional athletic institutions bring in a year. So that just gives you an idea. So here again, NJ.com, just doing a search. Here are just a number of different stories that you will see that will span from all the way back from 2009 all the way through today. This is just a few examples. And here's a Morris County headline, like I was saying: duo indicted for allegedly pimping out teen girls in Morris County. I believe that was based in Mount Olive. And yeah, so these are just some examples of headlines that you will find in NJ.com in New Jersey. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to try to play this video, and I'm not sure how Zoom, if Zoom will allow this or not. Let me see.
It should. We'll give it a go.
Okay, let's give it a try. I just want to start it around right here. Okay. So as this is starting, let me give you a brief introduction. This video is a story of, Holly Austin Smith, and she's going to tell you her story in this video, but she was a teenager in Atlantic City, New Jersey, who was groomed, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Her story is so incredibly telling. She's a survivor. She's written a book called Walking Prey, and this interview here is based upon her book. So I'll play this for a little bit, and then we'll really get into a lot of the details surrounding online grooming of children.
You may also just need to make sure you shared your volume too. I can see it, but I can't hear it. I'm not sure if others can.
You can't hear the video?
I'd like anybody else to say, I couldn't hear, I could see. Could anybody else hear?
No, I cannot hear.
Okay. Yeah, you might have to, the audio option is when you share the screen, that might be something you have to click.
All right, let me see.
You're doing very well, Dan. Very well.
I think I just got that there. Okay, here we go.
And
Okay.
I felt very unvalued by a lot of people around me. I was always looking for a connection out there in the world with someone. One day at the mall, I was sort of straggling behind my friends, and I noticed this guy looking at me, and I held his stare thinking he would look away, and he didn't. He motioned for me to come over to him. And that was really surprising and shocking, and at first I shook my head no, and I kind of looked around to see if anyone noticed this guy gesturing to me, and nobody noticed. And so I got really curious about what he wanted, and I felt really special that he pointed me out of the crowd. And I also felt like I had to go over there because I'd been waiting to make a connection with someone, and if I didn't go over there, it was never going to happen again. This was my window. So I walked over, and the exchange happened very fast. He gave me his phone number, and he took my phone number, and he said he would call, and so I kind of walked away feeling like, you know, not really sure what to make of it. And then he started calling me at home that night, and in 1992, we didn't have cell phones, so I had a teen line in my bedroom. So my parents didn't know that I was talking to a stranger because I was always on the phone talking to friends. And we talked on the phone for about 2 weeks, and he said things to me that made me feel good. Like, he said I was pretty enough to be a model, that I was too mature for high school. He just said things that a young teen girl wants to hear. And he also painted this glamorous lifestyle that he lived. He said that he traveled across the country, and that he met famous people, and he went to famous dance clubs, and that if I ran away, that I could do that too, and that he could get me into Hollywood, and I could be a songwriter or a musician or a model. And so I thought about those things, and as high school was looming in my future and I was struggling at home with my parents, I made the decision to run away. But within hours of running away, this person ordered me into prostitution in Atlantic City, New Jersey. So it was like that. I went from being a middle school girl to being on the streets of Atlantic City. It was very fast.
Why do you think you were vulnerable, and why do you think he, you know, he's in a mall, he could have picked any young girl, but he focused in on you? I mean, what was it about you that was a signal for him? Because I'm sure there are other girls just like you who fall prey like this.
He was standing in a payphone booth, pretending to be on the phone, and he was just watching the crowd. And if you were looking for a vulnerable girl, you would have seen that in me. The way that I was dressed, it suggested that I was looking for attention in a negative way. I was looking for attention from boys. I was straggling behind my friends, and I just looked very detached. But who knows how many girls he tried to connect with and how many didn't respond, but I responded. So you have to have both sides. You have to have someone who is specifically looking to exploit a kid, and then a kid who is vulnerable enough to respond to the attention.
You were under his control for about 72 hours, is that right?
It was about 2 days.
There's this chance encounter with a police officer, and you kind of give him some grief, but then almost like that, you make the right call, and one would assume when you're reading a book like yours, oh, she's saved, it's a rescue, this is great. But it really kind of gets at the heart of a lot of the problems. And problems don't just start in the beginning where you're a vulnerable girl, easy prey. They also start on the back end too. The police treat you like a criminal. Walk us through what happened.
Well, yeah, so I was spotted by a law enforcement officer the second night. I was out on the street, and he came up to me and he asked me how old I was, and I gave him the fake birthday. There were two people sort of in charge of me, and they told me what to say to police. They gave me a fake name and a fake birth date, and I stumbled over the birth date because I couldn't remember the year, and so the officer yelled at me to not lie to him. And so then I sort of created a fuss and started yelling like the people told me to do in order to deflect that attention, I guess. And it worked, and he threw up his hands and he walked away from me. And as he was walking away, I thought, if I don't say something, this is going to continue. I don't know where I'm going to wind up tomorrow. And I didn't want to be alone with that man again because he had raped me. Even though maybe I didn't understand that I had been raped, I understood that I had to have sex without consent. But, you know, and my idea of rape is sort of like violent, and the victim is screaming no, and I wasn't screaming no because I was a 14-year-old kid, and I said that I didn't want to, and I wanted him to stop. And when he didn't, and I didn't run out the room and try to get away, I felt like I sort of conceded. So I didn't understand that I was a victim of rape. But I knew that I didn't want to be alone with him again. So I called out to the officer, what if I was under 18? And what I meant by that was, what are my options? Because I didn't want to be out there anymore, but I also didn't want to go home. When I had decided to run away, it was a very real decision. I wanted a better life. And, but the officer arrested me, and he was very angry. And he called me names on the way to the police station. And I don't say that to shame the officer. I say that to stress the need for training and education to officers, especially when working with child victims.
At this stage, the police take you into custody, and they're asking you to basically, through this process, turn in the pimp, turn in these two people that you're involved with, but you're still struggling with everything, and then they're kind of feeling like you're uncooperative.
Right.
And then you're returned home when you should probably be in psychological counseling. You walk through all of this stuff. So talk to us about some of the cautionary tales that come out of your book in terms of how to deal with these young kids who, you know, the police identify them as prostitutes, but they're really victims.
When I present and speak about my story, and something that I stress in my book is those victims who are often called willing victims. So if a law enforcement officer comes across a child who is tied to a bed or beaten up and being forced into prostitution, then it's very clear to the officer that that child is a victim, and it's probably clear to the child as well. But if you come across a child who comes from a history of, say, poverty, and maybe a history of child abuse, child neglect, sexual abuse in childhood. If a child has experienced setbacks or exploitation a number of times, by the time they meet a trafficker, then that child may not necessarily realize that he or she is being exploited by a trafficker, because exploitation has happened so many times already. Or that child grew up in a way that they didn't have resources available to them, whereas now this trafficker is offering a home and food and money and clothes, and so they think that they're in a good place. They don't understand that they're being victimized. So if you have a kid on the street who appears to be a willing participant in prostitution, it could be unclear to law enforcement officers that he or she is a victim. And so what I say in my trainings to law enforcement is that any child in prostitution or any other form of commercial sex work is a victim in need of compassion and resources.
Okay, I'm sorry, let me go back. So, okay. All right, so that's Holly Austin Smith's story, and we actually have had the opportunity to meet her and do some presenting with her with Project Stay Gold in the past. So anyway, so what I love her story in the sense that it's very, so her story takes place in a mall, and I want you to think about the things that you heard from that story, and now think about that taking place on the internet, right? So this is really the heart of what our presentation is about today, and this is the data that we have collected from John Pizarro and the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. So in March of, let me go down here. So for the period of during COVID-19, where schools were shut and students were in distance learning, from March 1st of 2020 through March 23, or I'm sorry, through May 23rd of 2020, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force received 2,380 reports from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. That is up from 760 just the year prior, right? So we are seeing an increase of online exploitation by over 200% during COVID-19. And this is something that we are trying so desperately hard to get on the radar of school districts. The thing is that, and I'm a school administrator, and I'm the first to admit that there is so many complexities that are surrounding our learning situation right now with distance learning, and there's just so many things that we need to make sure that are in line and approved and so on, that I think it's difficult for schools to focus on this aspect right now. And this is really where the focus needs to be, is that the online exploitation of children is an increase of over 200% from one year to the next due to distance learning. And on a national scale, from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, they've experienced nationally an increase of 126% from May 2019 to May 2020. And you could see the numbers there. In May of 2019, 745,000 reports, up in 2020 to 1.6 million reports, right? So the question is how is this happening, right? So to really break it down, here are a number of different apps that are pictured here, right? And not only apps, but Fortnite is a video game. So what we have learned from John Pizarro and the work that they're doing and the work that they engage in every single day is that online predators are doing exactly what Holly Austin Smith described in her video. There are predators and traffickers that are looking, right, instead of scaling a mall, which still does happen, right? May not be happening as much now with COVID, but prior to COVID, it still happened. But now you have predators and traffickers that are now prowling through the internet. And what are they doing? They're looking for children just like Holly, right? A vulnerable child. And what they're doing is they're going to places like Instagram, for example. And on Instagram, they're looking for a young person that maybe doesn't have a lot of followers. And when they look at their pictures, they may not have a lot of likes. So what they'll start doing is they'll start liking a photo, and then they'll start commenting on a photo. And then, before long, as they're commenting and they're seeing what is posted, let's say on Instagram, they're beginning to learn more about that young person. And then, their next goal is to then engage in direct messaging, right? And start engaging in a dialogue and a conversation. And, and that's going to happen on all of these different apps. It's going to happen on Snapchat. It can happen on, I don't know how many of our kids are really using Facebook any longer. Kids still use Twitter. Even, YouTube has somewhat of a social media component to it where kids could have a YouTube channel and then you know, a predator could leave comments on there, and then that could lead to some sort of messaging. Obviously, TikTok is huge, but then you also have a lot of messaging apps like WhatsApp and I forgot the other one that I was thinking of. So anyway, and so then the predator's next goal is to then establish those direct messages. And in the direct message, you have to remember that they are appearing to our children as if, you know, it could be a 45-year-old man who is saying that he's a 15-year-old boy. It could be, you know, a 60-year-old man who is posing as a 12-year-old girl, right? And they're just engaging in what appears to be very innocent dialogue back and forth. But then what they're looking for is to exploit vulnerabilities within that young person. And they're looking to see what those vulnerabilities are and then how they can then exploit and use manipulation and coercion. And according to John Pizarro, that the predators and traffickers we're talking about, a very common trait is that they will be engaging in anywhere between 50 and 70 different conversations, or engaging in conversation with 50 to 70 different children at a time, because their ultimate goal is to find that child who's vulnerable and, you know, use manipulation and coercion, and then arrange a time where they can then meet that child in person. That's the ultimate goal, right? Is the meeting in person. So again, going back to Holly's story met the man in the mall. They exchanged numbers. They spoke over a period of time. She shared with him her hopes and dreams. He said how he could fulfill those hopes and dreams. And then the ultimate goal for him is what we see here still today, is arranging that time that they can meet in person. Because when they meet in person, you know, obviously that's where, you know, the exploitation is now taken to, you know, a whole different level. So that is a lot of how this is being operated. And you also have to keep in mind that predators and traffickers are highly proficient in the dark web, and a lot of communications will take place on the dark web. There's a lot of message boarding where predators learn how to, you know, prey upon our children in an online setting. And then also the dark web facilitates a lot of the online selling of children, or the online exploitation, where, and I'll give you another example of how this happens. So another way this happens is something called sextortion. And simply the way sextortion will happen is in what I described here, where the predator or trafficker is making that connection with the child. Oftentimes, you know, there will be this idea of sharing sensitive information, or it could be sharing potentially photographs, right? And so let's just create a common scenario where a predator may say, you know, after engaging in conversation, you know, can you send me a picture of yourself, you know, wearing this or not wearing this, or so on. And then once that predator has that picture, or maybe it's just sensitive information, maybe the child opens up to this person because this person has promised them their hopes to fulfill hopes and dreams, or has told them, you're so pretty, and the child's thinking, no one has ever told me I'm pretty. Or the predator is saying, you're so handsome, and the boy is thinking, no one has ever told me that I was handsome, or no one has ever told me I was good looking, no one has ever told me that I was strong. And you know, once their vulnerabilities are preyed upon, and there's somewhat trust that's established in this online dialogue and communication, when the child then shares sensitive information, the predator could then hold either that picture or that video or that information over the child's head and say, look, if you don't meet me in person, or if you don't give me more pictures or more information, then I will take that story and I will email it to your parents, or I will take that video and I'll send it to your principal, right? So what you see here, this is from a phenomenal organization called Thorn, and this is the work that they engage in, is to prevent sextortion, which is, as defined here, threats to expose a sexual image in order to make a person do something, right? So what we see here is 1 in 4 victims were 13 or younger when threatened. 2 and 3 victims were girls threatened before the age of 16. And then this is obviously how they're happening, right? First contact is typically by phone via social media, a social media friend request. And then victims are targeted on different platforms that they frequent. And those platforms could obviously be anything like we described: Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, different messaging apps, and many others. And and then, a terrifying statistic here is what Thorne has found, is that the threat, 60% of online victims threatened within 2 weeks of the initial contact. 47% of the victims experience threats daily. And then the major issue that we have regarding our youth is that they're staying silent, right? Victims are less likely to report outside of their inner circle. 54% disclosed to a friend or family, 26% reported to a platform or a website, and 17% reported to law enforcement. So that's just another way that online grooming is happening, right? So when we talk about the grooming process, think about what Holly said, right? She exchanged the number, he made that initial contact, and then in that period of time that they were in dialogue and talking, that's the grooming process. Though every conversation, that trafficker or predator is preying and is seeking out information from her to then prey upon and use manipulation to then manipulate her thinking and her emotions to build that sense of trust, so that meeting could then happen in person. And then that online grooming also happens here through likes and comments and direct messages, and so on. So that's the grooming process that's happening online. So regarding Sussex County, this is a story that broke. The Attorney General in the state, the Attorney Generals, I should say, I believe it's the last 4 Attorney Generals in the state of New Jersey, have been extremely active in child pornography raids and busts. And so this was a story that there was a national sweep that took place, and this was a story that broke. So the national sweep part of that sweep was a man from Sussex County. Sussex County man among 21 arrested in online child porn exploitation sweep in New Jersey, says authorities. And this is really interesting from the article. This is from the New Jersey Herald, which is the Sussex County paper. Tips to the state's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force have risen markedly during the pandemic, authorities say. Last year, they received 1,200 cyber tips between March 1 and July 31st. This year, they received about 3,600 during the same time. Authorities attribute that to more people staying home and sharing online content. And this is, and this is really the point that I want to drive home here. Still, it could worsen when children return to the virtual classrooms this fall, according to our Attorney General. So, as we're sitting here and I presented you with this terrifying scenario, here are 7 different things that we can all do and that you can do with your children at home, as well as any contact that you have with children in schools or through your organization. Here are 7 different things that we at the Coalition are recommending of what we could do to keep our children safe from online predators. We want to remind children to only interact online and on gaming apps with people they know and that they trust in the real world. That's very important. Whenever I speak to middle school or high school students, I always have a point in my presentation where I ask them to not raise their hand to answer this question, but I ask them a very pointed question. How many of you have ever engaged in an online conversation with someone that you did not know? So what I say to them is, it's not someone that you go to school with. It's not someone you grew up with. It's not a family friend. It's not someone from a church or a youth group. Someone that you do not know who they are. How many of you have ever engaged in a conversation at least one time online? And what I've learned as an educator is eyes are never quiet. Their eyes give away exactly what they're thinking without raising their hand. And I could tell you that every single kid that I speak to has had a conversation with someone they did not know, whether it's in a chat room or it's on social media or through an internet gaming app. The other thing to keep in mind is that, and I have this, where did I put that slide? I don't know where I put that slide. So one thing to keep in mind is that there are apps that actually hide other apps, right? So, you know, if let's say a 15-year-old boy or 16-year-old girl has dating apps on their phone and they're not supposed to have them, let's say, until they're 18. There are apps that kids can download. So for example, there's a particular calculator app that hides other apps, right? So even if you're a parent and you're being very, you know, you're really invested into what your child or children are doing on their phones, there are apps that actually will hide some of that will hide apps, right? So that's also something to keep in mind. And you know, that's also something that, you know, predators could use as a suggestion, right? Well, if you don't want you know, if we're going to be interacting on here, I need you to do this. I need you to hide this app so no one can see it, type thing, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Second, let children tell you about what they love about their games and online lives, and allow them to enjoy all that is good about apps, games, and online, which makes the conversations about concerns of online grooming easier to have, right? So if the dialogue is open, right, if the communication is open and honest about just the things that instead of making gaming and online gaming and online apps and social media apps something that's taboo or something that is you know, not allowed, you know, the more that there's the conversation about like what we like about them and how we enjoy them and how they could be useful, then students would be and children would be a little more open to talk about concerns. Warn children to not accept gaming dollars. So in Fortnite, it's the V-Bucks for people that they do not know and trust. That's another way that the predators are using extortion by giving them and now saying you owe me because I gave you these particular V-Bucks, for example. Review location markers are visible on children's devices. Remove any except the essential ones. Consider products to help us with this, which can also monitor some, but not all of your children's activity. And then 3 more things that you could do. Reduce shame in conversation with children. You know, if a child has shared a picture or information with someone, you know, it's really important for them to be able to turn to a parent, be able to turn to a counselor, be able to turn to a teacher or a coach and say, look, I did this. I know, you know, I now know it's wrong. And, you know, supporting the child through that entire learning process, because at the end of the day, you know, our kids are still learning as we are. And, you know, to be supportive in that way and not shame children if they do come forward and admit to something like that. Make sure that you know and your child knows what to do if they find themselves in an exploitation situation. And NCMEC is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They're an amazing organization. This is what they do. This is what they specialize in. And then another great idea is to spend device-free time with your family. You know, my wife and I watched that Social Dilemma documentary on Netflix, and you know, it's definitely something that, you know, it's hard for us all to do, right? Put the phone down and just say, you know what, I'm going to walk away from it for a few hours and I'm not going to check it. And, you know, so that's just another way that we could prevent. So just real quick, the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, our vision and mission is to unite communities in New Jersey to abolish human trafficking. We are partnered with close to 180 organizations throughout the state of New Jersey, and many of them are seen here. We all share the objective of abolishing human trafficking here, keeping our, ensuring that our children are safe, as well as adults. January is Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and our legislative committee has done a number of different, engaged in a number of different projects to, you know, to engage our legislature to provide legislation that will help us to achieve our goal of preventing human trafficking here in the state. One thing that we do in schools through our education committee, which I co-chair, is we have a program called Locker Slam. This past year we sent, actually I should update that on the bottom, but so between 2019 and 2020, we sent out well over 30,000 magnets to over 85 public and private middle schools and high schools throughout the state. And students will put these magnets on their lockers for the month of January, which really inspires a lot of conversation about the issue of human trafficking. This year we're looking to still do this project, probably going to end up being a virtual project when it's all said and done. One of the most effective programs we have is called SOAP, Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution. And what we'll do is we'll go to different hotels and we will replace their soap, the soap that they have in their bathrooms, with soap that has the human trafficking hotline on there. And it more or less, and we have this printed in a number of different languages, and it says if you are being forced to do something that you do not want to do, or I guess it's posing questions. Have you been forced to do something you want to do? Have you been, I can't read the exact things, but, and if so, please call this number. That's the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, which is manned 24/7 by the Polaris Project, which is a partnership with the FBI, and so on. This is a college internship program that we run every fall. So there's a number of things that we are doing to engage young people as well. But ultimately, the purpose of this, let me just go back to our screen here. I'll stop presenting. The ultimate goal of this presentation today was to just give you a little bit of insight into what our children are facing regarding online grooming, what some of the objectives and goals of awful people are, predators and traffickers, to prey upon the most vulnerable within our society, among our youth, and then 7 different things that we can do, and it's something that has become is a major priority of the coalition, to put these 7 things on the radar of not only the Department of Education in Trenton, but also on school districts throughout the state of New Jersey. Because I will tell you this much, I will say that the majority of school administrators and the majority of teachers have no idea that this is happening. And I will also say that probably the majority of parents in our state have no idea that this is happening or that this can even happen. I thank you for your time today. If you have any questions before we wrap up, please don't hesitate to ask.
Danny, I'll watch the chats, and if anybody has a question, please offer it up. But I find it very interesting that, number one, we have had twice recently, and we're having another session coming up in 2 weeks. We've had presentations on gaming for parents and youth, kind of like what you should know about gaming. And I think your point about as parents being open to conversations, like opening the door and not being critical of gaming. I think back in the day, Fortnite, I had a son who was a Fortnite avid player. I was very angry about it and didn't understand it. And we had lots of kibitzing about how long he played and what have you. But, what we're learning is we really need to, like you said, start a conversation about what it is that they like about it so that the door is open. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing, stay with me here, I'm seeing a thread of a common theme, and that whether it's, we just as parents and caregivers need to be more open with our kids and less judgmental when they're sharing with us. Mm-hmm. So don't be quick to say, how could you do that? That was a dumb thing to do, or say. We really need to let them know that we can hold space and hear what's happening. And I think that's the only way for us as parents to even begin to battle something like this, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Receptive. Yeah. Yep. Receptive, open. And just have that established relationship where the trust is there, and that the conversation could happen. Because that's the thing, right? The predators and traffickers are so incredibly savvy that they know how very quickly to get in between a child and their parent, right? So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Right. And I we will absolutely share your resources. I think I'm going to include the 7 tips that you can do in the memo, because that is so key. But I applaud you for your efforts in coming out and sharing this information. And I would just encourage everybody on the call to encourage others. We have to keep having these awkward conversations, and they might start a little, to be awkward, but the more we have them, the less awkward they are. And I think our kids need to know that we are a place they can come to and share without judgment and repercussions right away, right? Like, we need to understand their world, and they're tech savvy. They're leaving us in the dust, right? On on what they're able to do, and also, like you said, what the bad guys are able to do.
Right.
You're getting lots of good comments in the chat just about everybody being appreciative of the information that you offered, and even the soap. I love how clever that is in the hotels. I mean, it's so funny how we're so advanced technologically, but something so simple.
Yeah. So that was soap is founded by Teresa Flores. She's a survivor of human trafficking. I believe she lives in Ohio now. If you Google Teresa Flores, there's a TED Talk that she gives, which is phenomenal, so inspiring, so powerful. Strongly recommend you watch that. And really, the soap initiative started when the Super Bowl came to North Jersey, and there was a major initiative to replace all of the soap in dozens of hotels throughout the East Rutherford and Lyndhurst area, where, because of the amount of people that were coming there for the Super Bowl, we knew that there would be a rise in trafficking. There is a rise in trafficking around all Super Bowls. And it's not only the Super Bowl, it's any large event in a metropolitan area where you have thousands of people descending on, a large city for a weekend, right? Unfortunately, what law enforcement has found is that there is a rise in a demand, for sex services, and the traffickers will meet that demand with a supply.
Well, and I just also want to lift up the police officers and how very difficult it is for them to respond to, even like I thought Holly's video was excellent about how she was treated, because we have to also remember from the police officer's perspective, it's such an interesting, there's so many layers to what they are dealing with on a daily basis, and the people they come across and the scenarios. Right. It's very, very difficult.
And earlier, as you said, a major misconception is that trafficking from a law enforcement or from a police officer standpoint who are not trained is that, this is just prostitution. We have in New Jersey the Safe Harbor Law, and the Safe Harbor Law says very clearly, and the purpose of the Safe Harbor Law is that if a minor is being prostituted, they are not considered a prostitute. A minor is considered a victim of human trafficking. Whereas before the Safe Harbor Law, when Holly was on the streets, we did not have the Safe Harbor Law. She was considered a prostitute, even though she was a minor. And oftentimes what's really sad is that human trafficking is written off as, oh, it's just prostitution. No, it's not. It's obviously abuse if it's a minor, and if it's a minor, they're a victim of human trafficking. They're not a prostitute.
Well, excellent point, Danny. So I am going to encourage everybody, wrapping this up, thanking you for your time. I know you're squeezing us in between things today, so thank you for making time for us. But keep conversations going. Keep conversations going with your children. Keep conversations going with your neighbors, with your coworkers. Because we really need to be, especially with COVID, so many things are on the rise, right? I mean, domestic abuse, child abuse, human trafficking, there are so many things. And I think the best thing we can do, the good thing is it's something we can all do, which is keep our ears open and ask lots of questions and really try to take that information in without judgment and assess what's going on. And if it's something that we don't know how to handle, there are plenty of resources out there of folks who can help us figure out how to handle any given situation. So Danny, thank you so much for your time. And I just wanted to share with everybody, hopefully today, if you are on our list, which I hope you are, and if you're not, drop me an email. But we're sending out our list for October activities, which is a calendar which will show you all of the different things that we have coming up in Lunch and Learns. We're talking about next week, the school to prison pipeline. We're talking about how to speak to different ages about anti-racism, depending on the age and development of the child. We have several parent support groups, including experts coming in to talk to us about gaming. That's on Monday the 12th. We have tips on finding a job in this job market and bizarre time that we're living in, but we have lots of resources, and we just really thank you for making us a part of your day. And I will say it again, keep those conversations going, keep the ears open, and just know that Family Partners is here to help you connect to resources if you're not sure which way to turn. So everybody stay healthy. Danny, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And we will be sending out information shortly to everyone who participated.
Great.
Take care. Stay safe.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.